Hey, this soup for breakfast is so bland. Why is it so watery? It's terrible. I'm trying to make it healthier. The doctor said I need to watch the salt. Who cares? I love rich flavors. This was my mother-in-law, or MIL for short. She always craves overly seasoned food, even though she's overweight and borderline diabetic. Her doctor gave her strict warnings, but she ignores them, dumping an unreasonable amount of salt and pepper into anything I cook. I watched, stunned, as she doctored the soup I carefully prepared with low-sodium ingredients. Apparently, nothing I make is ever good enough. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if she's trying to kill herself with all that extra seasoning. If she did, I wouldn't exactly be heartbroken. NIL seems to live for making my life difficult. Every day, it's constant complaints, insults, and spiteful behavior. I'm Alice, 29, a working woman who also juggles housewife duties. My husband and I have been married for 3 years, but we don't have any children yet. That's because of me, apparently. My infertility is her favorite weapon against me. You're worthless as a woman if you can't have children. Defective, really, she'd say with a smug smile. You should be grateful you're even allowed to stay in this house. Sometimes I agreed. After so many failed attempts at conceiving, I felt defective. I drew the short straw in life, it seemed. Haha, how could you say that? I replied once, but my heart wasn't in it. Because it's true. A woman who can't have kids is finished, she snapped. She's right, my husband chimed in, laughing. Defective. That word crushed me. I want a baby more than anything. I've been visiting doctors, trying different treatments, but it's draining both physically and emotionally. The costs are overwhelming too, and after so much failure, I decided to stop the treatments altogether. Ironically, my husband used to complain about the money we were spending on fertility treatments, calling it a waste, yet he never stopped pressuring me to get pregnant. What's the point of pressuring me? I said sharply, I can't get pregnant if it's not happening. After stopping the treatments, I had briefly entertained the idea of living happily with just the two of us. But my mother-in-law hadn't given up her obsession with a grandchild. To taunt me, she even bought diapers and paraded them around. Look, I bought diapers, she announced with a smirk. Excuse me? You'll need them eventually, she said with a grin. Aren't those a bit small for you to wear, MIL? I replied dryly. Ha! These are for a baby, can't you see that? Well, I wouldn't know. I'm just the defective woman who can't have children, remember? Her laughter cut through the tension, but her expression shifted quickly. That's enough, she snapped, storming off to her room, visibly angry. I sighed in relief. Exhausted from work, I had no patience for her snide remarks anymore. She seemed to have nothing better to do than make my life miserable. We had moved in with my in-laws after my father-in-law passed away last year. My mother-in-law was devastated by his death, and around the same time, she had been diagnosed with borderline diabetes. My husband insisted we move in to support her, though honestly she seemed fine as long as she took her meds and followed a healthy diet. The problem was, she did neither. She ignored her medication and ate whatever she wanted, making her condition likely to get worse. Still, I had no intention of being her caregiver. In my 20s, working a demanding job and taking care of my in-laws was not the life I envisioned. The next day, my day off, I was busy with house chores when MIL, who usually lounged on the sofa eating snacks, suddenly got up and walked into my room. Annoyed but with my hands full, I let it go. I cleaned your room for you, she said with a smug smile. Oh, thanks, I replied, sensing something off. You know, if you leave your room messy, you'll attract bugs. Maybe I should switch rooms with your husband, she added, her tone dripping with mock concern. Ha, right. Thanks for the advice, I muttered, forcing a smile. She seemed to think I was grateful, which only made me more suspicious. Something was definitely up. That night, I decided to sleep in my husband's room instead of mine. He had been away on a business trip since the day before, and I knew he wouldn't mind if I took over his space. We usually slept in separate rooms, partly because our relationship had cooled off, but mostly due to my night shifts as a nurse. I didn't want to disturb him with my irregular hours. Once MIL had retreated to her room, I quietly made my way to my husband's room and settled in. For 2 days, I slept there, and MIL seemed oddly suspicious. She watched me closely, probably because I looked too cheerful for her liking. My mother-in-law started asking strange questions. "Don't you feel any pain or anything?" she asked, a little too casually. "Huh? What do you mean?" "Oh, never mind," she said, avoiding eye contact. Was she suspecting something? Her sudden shift in behavior had me on edge, but I had the night shift coming up and needed to relax before work. That's easier said than done with Nil around. She never lifts a finger, just lounges on the couch, snacking and reading Japanese comics aimed at women. I caught a glimpse of one of the covers. It was a sloppily translated English version titled Epic Mother and Daughter-in-Law Swamp Battle. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at her choice of reading material. It seemed fitting for her. She was probably plotting her next move to make me, the bratty daughter-in-law, miserable. Later that night, my husband returned from his business trip, already looking exhausted. It was nearly 10 p.m. I'm wiped. I'm hopping in the bath. Sure, I'll heat it up for you. Grab a beer while you wait. Thanks, I will. Actually, wait. It's not safe to drink alcohol before a bath. Fine, I'll go for a non-alcoholic beer then, he said, a little annoyed. Reluctantly, he grabbed the non-alcoholic beer because I had warned him about the risks of mixing alcohol with a hot bath. You'd think he'd know better. Even saunas post signs about not drinking before entering, but common sense isn't something that comes naturally to him or my mother-in-law, for that matter. After his bath, my husband started singing loudly. We live in a single-family home, but still, at that hour, it was bound to annoy the neighbors. La 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 la, he sang at the top of his lungs. Hey, you're too loud. Quiet down. I warned him. You're the one who's loud, he shot back, clearly not planning to stop. My mother-in-law, of course, took this opportunity to chime in, strolling into the bathroom area like she had something important to add. Wackham's just trying to have a good time. What's the problem? You really don't know how to treat your husband, do you? Always complaining, always nagging. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to argue back. It was always the same routine, or acting like the perfect, loving mother-in-law while constantly undermining me. So inconsiderate and full of complaints, my mother-in-law muttered. Hey, I'm not the one constantly complaining, MIL, I shot back. Ha, back talk, huh? You're definitely not cute. Not that you were ever a beauty to begin with. That's fine by me. I'm probably a knockout in some other country, I quipped with a shrug. She laughed, but I could tell she didn't appreciate my comeback. Meanwhile, my husband stepped out of the bath and grabbed a drink. It was already 10:30 p.m., and I needed to head to the hospital for my night shift. Oh, by the way, I've been sleeping in your room. Would you mind switching with me tonight? My clothes are everywhere. Ah, sure, whatever, he replied, not really paying attention. All right, I'm off then. Take care, I whispered to him quietly, hoping MIL wouldn't hear. Just as I was about to grab my bag and leave, I heard my husband let out a loud groan. What? What happened? I turned around to see him curled up on the floor, clutching his leg in pain. He looked like he was in agony. MIL's face went pale, and she started panicking. What's going on? Speak. But no matter what I asked, he couldn't respond. I was about to rush over when I noticed something odd. The floor was unusually slippery. Even with socks on, I could barely keep my balance. What the heck is this? I muttered, trying not to slip myself. Watkin? MIL, what on earth did you do? I didn't do anything. It's not my fault, she stammered, her voice shaky. Blaming her wasn't going to solve anything, so I immediately called for an ambulance. My husband was rushed to the hospital. Work was the last thing on my mind at that moment. He kept clutching his leg even after we arrived at the hospital. His face slick with sweat and pain etched all over it. It was clear he was in serious trouble. Ow, it hurts so bad, he groaned. Hang in there, Watkin. Help is coming, I said, trying to stay calm. Thankfully, the doctor examined him quickly, and I could see some relief wash over my husband. As we suspected, his leg was indeed broken, a fifth metatarsal fracture, caused by twisting his ankle when he slipped on the slick floor. His foot was swollen, and everything made sense. People usually fracture that bone by tripping or putting too much weight on it, which is exactly what happened to him. I knew the pain all too well. A few years ago, I twisted my ankle falling down the stairs while lost in my music. I heard a loud snap, and the pain was unbearable. It turned out to be a fifth metatarsal fracture as well. It was so embarrassing that I even lied to my friends about how it happened. Since his injury didn't require hospitalization, my husband was allowed to come home. I was scheduled for the night shift at the hospital, but my nursing supervisor insisted I take the night off. It wasn't a life or death situation, but I guess she was genuinely concerned. I survived, but now I've got a fever, Watkins said, wincing. Well, you broke your leg, of course you'd have a fever, I replied, trying to comfort him. But the question that lingered in my mind was, why had the floor been so slippery in the first place? Why don't we ask Mil about that, huh? I said, anger bubbling up inside me. My husband turned to her. Hey, what did you do to the floor in that room? Well, she stammered, trying to avoid eye contact. The floor was all slippery. That's why I slipped and fell. I could have seriously broken my leg. That room is for my daughter-in-law, so I greased the floor. What? My husband's eyes widened in shock. I was hoping she would slip, so I put a lot of grease down. I never expected you to go in there and fall, she said, her tone casual, as if she hadn't just admitted to endangering my life. Unbelievable. My mother-in-law had deliberately greased the floor to make me fall. She had claimed to clean the room, but her real intention was to harm me. Rage surged through me. If I had walked into that room, I might have broken my leg, or worse, hit my head, which could have been fatal. What she did wasn't just reckless, it was criminal. You're despicable, my husband seethed. You're not family to me anymore. I got seriously hurt because of you. I'm going to the police, he declared, grabbing his phone. Wait, I didn't directly hurt anyone, did I? She protested, panic creeping into her voice. It's not my fault. Your wife told you to go into her room, so she's the one to blame. Shut up, he snapped. That's not the point. You're getting arrested. Mil lunged to snatch the phone from him, but even with his broken leg, my husband was stronger. He clutched his phone tightly, already speaking to the police. As I stood there, watching this nightmare unfold, I couldn't help but think I'd rather be at work. Dealing with patients, no matter how stressful, was better than dealing with this chaos. The neighbors would catch wind of this soon enough. And honestly, maybe they should. What she'd done wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was dangerous. You know, I said, turning to Mil. I could have been hurt too. Maybe I should also talk to the police. What? No, I didn't mean to hurt you. You don't know for sure I'd be charged with anything. You knew the risks, I said, my voice cold. Or did you think you could just erase me from this world without consequences? Well, I did think it would be better if you just disappeared, she muttered. My blood ran cold. You're the worst. Your mindset is criminal. Personally, I think you should stay in jail forever. My husband, still on the phone, looked at me with a mix of shock and exhaustion. Let's get a divorce. What? Mil gasped. I can't do this anymore, he said, shaking his head. If I stay in this house, she might actually succeed in getting rid of you one day. I'm too scared to live with that. And honestly, your lack of morals disgusts me. Wait, don't say we'll get divorced over this. My husband fixed his gaze on her. This? You've insulted my wife, called her defective. Do you even realize how much that hurts? I can live without you just fine. No, I need you, my mother-in-law cried, her voice desperate. I was counting on your income. I even just signed a new car contract. What? I turned to her stunned. I finally got the Toyota Century I've always wanted, straight from Japan, she said, her voice shaking. I don't care anymore, I replied coldly. I cleaned up the greasy floor, threw my things into a bag, and stuffed more into my carry-on. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the table. As I rummaged through a shelf of dishes, I thought about the divorce papers. Then I found them, the very papers my husband had written years ago. Remember this? I held up the divorce papers. You said if I couldn't have a child within 2 years, we'd get a divorce. Well, here we are. I can't have children, so let's end this. You must feel relieved now. Wait, what about the loan for my Century? He stammered. Who cares? I said, walking out the door. I headed straight to the hospital. When I arrived, the charge nurse didn't ask questions. She could tell something was up. Being a nurse, I knew I could support myself without needing a husband or a toxic family. I wondered why I had endured so much, being treated like a servant and putting up with their cruelty. The more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it all seemed. The next morning, I filed for divorce. He became my ex-husband that day. Given the emotional toll he and his family put me through, I consulted a lawyer to seek compensation. In the end, my ex-husband was ordered to pay me. A part of me thought, serves you right. Since the police got involved, the neighbors turned their backs on my mother-in-law. She couldn't keep quiet and told everyone how her son broke his leg. And now they all think she's a terrible parent. My ex-husband doesn't want anything to do with her anymore and even kicked her out. She's been living on a small survivor's benefit, complaining that it's impossible to make ends meet. Her once lavish lifestyle has turned into a struggle just to get by. As for my ex-husband, I don't care what happens to him. He made a foolish decision, buying a car without thinking it through. I'm sure he can't afford it now, especially since he always assumed I'd be there to help with the bills. His lack of foresight annoyed me, but it's no longer my problem. Later, I started dating a doctor at the hospital. 2 years after that, we got married, and to my amazement, we were blessed with a child. It felt like a miracle, especially after everything I've been through. From now on, I'm dedicated to my new family, focused on building a future full of love and happiness.
Upon arriving at the Target high-rise apartment, I approached the concierge and was handed the keys to the room. Through the elevator reserved for the higher floors, I made my way to the top floor of the apartment. Wow, this is lovely! As the door opened, my sister-in-law, Laura, was the first to leap in, dancing around as she exclaimed, "Let's get unpacking." I called out, but no one offered to help. Predictable, yet it still irked me. The movers placed the boxes where directed, and I was left to unpack alone. "I'll take this spacious room." Katrina can have the tiny storeroom. My father-in-law, Harrison, and my mother-in-law, Rosalind, went ahead and decided who was getting which room. But I ignored them and continued my work. "This room is really nice. It would make a great final home." "Good for us." My husband, Oliver, and the in-laws said to each other, all smiles. "It feels like a dream to live in such a house," Laura said with her eyes brimming with tears. It might be time to reveal the truth. "Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh?" My name is Katrina. I'm a 32-year-old freelance illustrator. I used to work for a major publishing company, but went independent and now mainly take on projects from my former employer, while also starting to work as a children's book author. I married Oliver 2 years ago, and we began living together in the apartment I've been residing in. The reason we live in my house is that it's my property, and Oliver, who was renting elsewhere, moved in with me. My parents died in a car accident when I was young. Afterwards, I was raised by my grandparents, and after graduating from college and securing a job, I bought this apartment. The payment was made using the compensation and insurance money received from my parents' accident. My grandparents raised me without touching that money and gave it to me to use for myself when I graduated college. I bought this place because my grandparents entered a nursing home. They had reserved a spot in the nursing facility, intending to move in together after raising me, not wanting me to bear the burden of their care. After much thought, I decided to buy this convenient apartment, which was also close to the nursing home my grandparents were in. My grandparents said there were other things I could spend the money on, but to me, this was the best use. I have been living here for almost 10 years now. The 10 years I spent with my parents and the 10 years I spent with my grandparents are nearly equal. I've been living in this apartment a third of my life, and I have grown quite attached to this place. I met Oliver at a friend's wedding after party. He was a colleague of my friend's husband. We were of the same age and formed a group that started hanging out together. Over time, several couples formed from this group, and a few have married. And one of those couples was Oliver and I. Oliver was cheerful and seemed to brighten the room just by being there. From our first meeting, I was attracted to him. I admired his cheerful nature, something I lacked, and thought he was a wonderful person. However, that was only the face Oliver showed to the world, and I quickly learned about his other side after we got married. While Oliver was very gentlemanly during our courtship, he turned out to be the type who changes once the marriage is set. No, it was worse than that. After we got married, he said something unbelievable. "Since I'm living in your house, you should take care of the living expenses." "What do you mean?" "The expenses would be the same even if I weren't here, right? So, you should continue to cover them as you have been." I think that's how it should be. Indeed, my apartment was already paid off, with no mortgage remaining. However, there were still maintenance fees, a sinking fund for repairs, and property tax. And since we have a car, there's also the parking fee. So, those are expenses you'd be paying even if I weren't here, right? That's true, but then, there should be no problem with you continuing to pay them as usual. His argument seemed reasonable at first glance, but was fundamentally flawed. But Oliver, you're living here now, too. We agreed to split the living expenses. I'd really appreciate it if you could contribute. When I said this, Oliver's eyes narrowed angrily. You're so money-grubbing! I never thought you were that kind of woman. I was stunned and speechless. To me, it was obvious that as a married couple, we would share our lives equally. I had naturally assumed we would split the expenses for our home. I'm not saying I won't contribute anything. I'll definitely pay half for my part. But you own this house, right? So, he meant since it's my property, I should bear the costs. I'll pay for my own necessities, isn't that fair enough? Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. In the beginning, Oliver did pay half the living expenses as promised. But only the half that I billed him for. This month's electricity bill came to this amount. That seems quite high. You're probably wasting money working from home? I had quit my job while dating Oliver and started working freelance. Though I occasionally went out for meetings and networking, most of my work was done from home. It doesn't seem fair. First, Oliver complained about the high utility bills. Unfair? How so? Well, I work outside almost all day. And I'm supposed to pay for your electricity use while you work from home? What a reasoning. I was too astounded to respond. I only use a little when I come home to sleep. So, I don't have to pay half, right? Following this logic, Oliver began paying only a minimal amount. The same went for gas and water bills. Still, I tolerated it. Sure, Oliver was only home for a short time. And having an extra person did significantly increase the utility bills. But it was impossible to calculate exactly how much each of us used. Despite his complaints, we did share the living expenses, so I silently accepted his reasoning. Looking back, I can't believe how foolish I was, but at the time, I thought it was necessary. I decided it was better to endure and keep our marital life peaceful than to fight over something trivial from the start. Aside from money issues, Oliver was as bright and fun as before we got married. Though the financial concern always lingered in the back of my mind, I didn't struggle to live without his contributions. And I valued our happy times more. But the supposed happiness began to feel increasingly precarious. More overtime today, they really need to get it together. Oliver started coming home later, sounding annoyed. Are you okay with all this overtime? There's a guideline that working over a certain number of hours a month is dangerous. You don't understand. Those are just nominal figures. A good salesman isn't just working the hours logged on the time card. Oliver said this disdainfully. Katrina, you've had to pull all-nighters to meet deadlines, right? Yes, that's true. That's my point. Don't be fooled by just the apparent numbers. I graduated from an art college and worked as an illustrator. So I really didn't know much about sales. Faced with his assertion, I had no choice but to believe him. I understand. But please, don't overdo it. I know. You're kind, Katrina. I won't push myself too hard. Oliver reassured me gently, embracing my shoulder. I tried to believe in Oliver's kindness forcefully, as if believing was the only way to keep my peace of mind. Gradually, I felt increasingly betrayed by Oliver over the year. They say people can react to sudden pain, but become desensitized to slow, incremental pain. By that point, Oliver's betrayals had accumulated significantly, yet I felt I was just enduring a little longer, spending my days pretending not to notice for the sake of peace. Then, a significant event occurred. My family's coming over soon, is that okay? One morning, Oliver suddenly mentioned this. Harrison and Rosalind? And Laura too? I had visited his family's home once before we married, for a family meeting. It was a small house in the countryside. It seemed to be a fairly old house, and every part of it was old, but my parents-in-law were living there. At that time, Laura had already moved out after getting married, so I wasn't able to meet her. We did message her, but as she couldn't come due to her schedule, but gave us a message, welcome to the family. Since we didn't have a wedding ceremony and only took photos, that was the only time I met his parents. Of course, I never had a chance to meet Laura. Our friends held a party for us to congratulate, but I still hadn't met Oliver's relatives. As I didn't have much interaction with my own relatives, and I did not find it so strange. Now, suddenly, his parents and Laura were coming to visit. It wasn't odd for them to want to see how we were doing after a year of marriage. Without any doubt, I agreed to Oliver's words. A week later, as promised, the in-laws came to our house. This is your place? It's not very big, is it? That was the first thing they said as they entered our home. Of course, it's not big. This house was originally bought for me to live in alone. It has 3 rooms and a spacious living dining area. One room is almost used as a storage, and the remaining rooms served as my office and bedroom. When Oliver started living with me, he wanted a space to work from home, so I gave up my office for Oliver's study. And now I work in the living room. It's spacious enough for 2 people to live without any inconvenience. As I was thinking this, Laura, whom I was meeting for the first time after Rosalind, entered the house. You're right, it's smaller than I thought. Are we going to live here together? It's small, but bear with it. They say any place becomes comfortable if you live in it. Well, it's better than nothing. I'll manage to live here. How long do they intend to stay? As I pondered vaguely, Oliver commanded me with an irritated voice. Hey, what are you dozing off for? Hurry up and carry in my parents' luggage. What? Oh, sorry. Which ones are their luggage? I thought it would be just enough luggage for a short stay, maybe a duffel bag. But when I looked inside the entrance, I couldn't find anything. What are you looking at? It's outside. Rushing to the entrance, I saw about 10 cardboard boxes piled up in the hallway. Cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house? I didn't understand the meaning, but leaving such things in the hallway would bother other residents. Fortunately, none of the boxes were too heavy, and I somehow managed to bring all of them into the living room by myself. Since it's a living dining area, it's quite spacious. Although it's obstructive, stacking them up secured enough space to place them. During this time, Oliver and the in-laws were sitting and talking. Make coffee once you're done with the luggage. Hurry up, everyone is tired. I couldn't think properly due to the situation and moved reflexively to Oliver's words. You really are so inconsiderate. I'm worried about our future. I'll sleep in this room. While I was cluelessly making coffee, Laura declared our bedroom as her room. "Ah, that's fine. I'll clean up the storage with Mom, and when we're done, we'll sleep together. It'll be nice to sleep with Oliver after a long time." Sleeping closely with family, how nice. Oliver and his parents acted as if I didn't exist, enjoying their family time. Our house only has a bedroom, a storage room, and what now serves as Oliver's study, which was my former office. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long will this lifestyle continue? It seems humans can't think properly when faced with situations far beyond their usual understanding. While I was stunned, everything had already ended. The next day, no, from the moment the in-laws moved in, hell began. "Hey, isn't the food ready yet?" "Sorry, I'm preparing it now." "You're really slow." Oliver must have a lot of patience to put up with someone like you. The in-laws lazed around the house all day, doing nothing, and treated me like a servant. At first, I endured it, thinking it would only be for a few days. But listening to the conversations between the in-laws and Oliver, it became clear that this was going to be a permanent situation, and I awakened. Here's the summary. The in-laws had fled from their hometown because Laura had returned home after getting divorced. The reason for the divorce was Laura's infidelity. She had affairs with multiple people. All of this came to light recently, and her ex-husband demanded compensation, which they couldn't afford, so they fled here. Oliver had told me that his in-laws owned their home, but that was a lie. Originally, that house belonged to Rosalind's real family, where her parents lived. Rosalind and Harrison moved in with them because they couldn't afford to live by themselves. And after Rosalind's parents passed away, they just stayed there. The real owner was Rosalind's brother, and he asked them to leave, but they stayed, claiming residency rights. Rosalind's brother had his own home, so he couldn't force his sister's family to move out. He had requested them to leave, but couldn't do no more than that. Then, with Laura returning with a mountain of compensation to pay, Rosalind and Harrison tried to sell the house to raise money. Rosalind's brother, upon learning the situation, was furious and threatened legal action. That's why the in-laws showed up at our place with all the belongings she could carry. Those belongings, 10 boxes of them, the ones I struggled to bring into our house the day they arrived, representing their entire fortune. I don't know what's inside, and frankly, I don't want to know, but it seems there's nothing of real value that could be called a fortune. In short, the in-laws moved in with us because they were broke. And it looks like they plan to live off of us indefinitely. In such a family, Oliver was miraculously smart. He was good at his studies and managed to graduate from college on a scholarship. You wouldn't guess he's part of that family just by looking at him. He continued to play the role of a refreshing, fine young man, got a job at a well-known company, and then met and married me. I couldn't see through Oliver's true nature or the real face of the in-laws. My parents had already passed away, so I'm all alone. But I'm working and already own a house. To Oliver, I must have seemed like a perfect target. No way, I'm not going to let this happen to myself. Now that I know everything, I refuse to quietly become their slave. I won't let this no-good family take advantage of me. I started planning my retaliation and took action the very next day. For now, I had to act submissive. I couldn't let Oliver or the in-laws catch on to my plan. I had to catch them off guard. Just like how they suddenly showed up here. After pretending to listen to the in-laws for about a week, one day, Laura said to me, "Give me some money," Laura demanded, extending her open right hand. She was so blatantly freeloading. It was irritating, but I had decided not to resist for now. I handed Laura a few bills. "Is this all? Don't you have more?" "I don't have more on me right now since this was sudden." "Then a credit card will do." "Absolutely not. If I gave her a card, there's no telling what she'd do with it. I can't lend you a card. I'll withdraw some money from the bank tomorrow. Please wait until then. I managed to quiet the complaining in-laws by making that promise. I wouldn't give them the card no matter what. That night, after Oliver came home, he complained about it. You could have just lent them the card. You're really stingy with money. I was appalled by his words, but I apologized, thinking it over. I'm sorry. I thought there could be problems if something happened. Like what? I was afraid of lending a card with a different name, and if Rosalind and Harrison got arrested for misuse, I couldn't do it. Oliver seemed satisfied with this reason. Then, make a family card for my mom and dad. I'm counting on you. Understood. I replied as such, but I had no intention of making one. About a month later, Oliver asked about the status of the family card. Maybe the in-laws, having received money several times, found it troublesome and urged Oliver to ask for the card. I'm sorry, but it seems I can't make it, I said, feigning disappointment. I hadn't applied for a family card and wasn't disappointed at all. Why not? Rosalind and the others are considered relatives, not family, so it doesn't work. Apparently, it's not okay just to live here temporarily. The in-laws had just rolled in without permission, and no proper arrangements had been made for living together. They haven't even changed the address registration, so it seems like there's no actual residence. I see. Faced with this explanation, Oliver seemed to have no choice but to accept. Well, then we just need to change the address registration. That's right, since we're going to live here anyway. Go ahead and take care of the procedures. What a nerve for them to order me to do so. About that, I think this house is a bit small for us to live in permanently. Now that you mention it, maybe that's why you haven't been coming home much lately. When I said that, Oliver looked a bit puzzled. I've been staying at hotels because I've been working late. Oh, that must be tough. So, I was thinking, why don't we move out of this house? Oliver and the in-laws were surprised by my suggestion. This house was originally bought for me to live alone, and while Oliver and I could barely make do, it's definitely too small in the current situation. Indeed. Look at this. Wouldn't you want to live in a house like this? I showed them the brochure for a new apartment. It was a recently completed high-rise building. The brochure featured photos of a top-floor apartment. Spacious, with large windows offering a view of the city below. How were you able to get an apartment like this? I thought our current place was too cramped, so I decided to go for it. I sold this place and added my parents' inheritance and savings to buy it. That's great. This place isn't bad, but that one is definitely better. Laura and Oliver, who had been looking skeptically, relaxed when they learned the payment was already complete. Wow, you've got some sense. I'm seeing you in a new light for the first time. Yeah, I guess I can acknowledge you as Oliver's wife. The in-laws nodded in agreement with smiles. And just like that, the move was settled smoothly. About a month later, the day of the move arrived. It was a bit sad to say goodbye to the house we had lived in for so long, but it was for a brighter future. Once the belongings were loaded into 2 trucks, we headed to our new destination. Upon arriving at the high-rise and speaking to the concierge, we were handed the keys to our apartment. To our top-floor apartment via the high-rise exclusive elevator. Wow, it's beautiful! Laura was the first to dash in, exclaiming as if dancing. Let's get unpacking. I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, but still infuriating. The movers placed the brought items were directed, and I began unpacking alone. I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storage. The in-laws were assigning rooms as they pleased, but I ignored them and continued my work. This room is truly wonderful. A great choice for our final home. I'm glad you feel that way. Oliver and the in-laws were all smiles, exchanging such words. It's like a dream to live in a house like this, Laura said, teary-eyed. Now, it might be a good time for the reveal. Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh? A good moment to show the in-laws reality. Why would you all live here? What are you talking about? It's our new home. We're the ones who will live here. Huh? I feigned exaggerated surprise. This isn't your house. I bought this place to live with my grandparents. You asked if we wanted to live in a house like this. Laura began to make a scene, raising her voice. Yes, I did ask if you wanted to live here, but that's all I did. I never said you could live here. Just as I said, I never mentioned living together. Who would want to live with these people forever? So, please leave now. I am the owner of this house. The landlord is telling you to leave. Please comply before things get complicated. Don't be ridiculous! Oliver stomped his feet in anger, his face turning red. The only thing you should be doing is listening to me. My family and I will live in this house. If you don't like it, you should leave. That's right, get out. That's right, leave. Oliver and the in-laws were pressuring me to leave. I contacted the concierge directly through the intercom on the wall. Excuse me, there are some strange people refusing to leave my house and trying to kick me out, the actual resident. Please come immediately. As soon as I finished speaking, a siren sounded throughout the room. What's this? So noisy. Make it stop right now. The security staff arrived promptly after the alert. This is a high-end condominium after all. These people are the building security. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police next. When the security officer pressed the doorbell and asked what happened, the in-laws started panicking. They realized what I said wasn't a lie. Although the security staff arrived, the in-laws pleaded, crawling on the ground, asking to be heard. I decided to listen, curious about what Oliver had been telling them. Oliver had been telling the in-laws I was a pitiable woman with no relatives, and that I couldn't live without him. So that's why he was keeping me here. And that they could use me as they pleased, like a housekeeper. That was what he had been telling his own parents. I felt sympathy for the in-laws who provided such valuable testimony. Actually, when I gave money to the in-laws, I made them sign a paper with the amount written on it. Essentially, it was a promissory note. I want proof that I've handed it over properly to show Oliver. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. If you sign it, I'll give you as much as you want. Knowing they could get as much money as they wanted just by signing, the in-laws easily complied. Thanks to that, I had proof of how much I had lent them. I had been thinking of collecting from the in-laws, but it seemed impossible for them to pay back. So I decided to take it from Oliver instead and thought it best to evict them from the apartment. Thanks to this, you've helped me a lot. If you leave now, I'll consider this never happened, but if you come back, you'll have to pay everything all at once. As I showed them the promissory note and said this, the in-laws finally gave up and left. I'm Katrina's husband. I have the right to live here. I won't leave. Oliver refused to move. If that's how you feel, let's settle this here and now. All right, let's have a little talk then. But if you try anything funny, I'll call them right back. I thanked the security guards and sent them back home. Why are you doing this? Did you dislike my family that much? Of course I do. They suddenly show up, treating me like slaves in a sneak attack. I made it clear to Oliver. Fine. If you dislike them that much, I'll tell my mom and dad to leave. But I can stay, right? I was astounded. He was planning to abandon his in-laws just so he could stay. What a despicable man. No, you need to leave too. Why? We're married, aren't we? I presented Oliver with a folder. What is this? Oliver turned pale as he looked inside the folder. A pretty woman, isn't she? I heard you've been living together for half the week lately. It was evidence of Oliver's affair. There were tons of photos of the two looking cozy, arm in arm, walking together, entering a hotel. Oliver had started dating her right after marrying me. I heard you had plans to live with her in that apartment once we were separated. Lies! Who would say such a thing? I turned on the voice recorder I was holding. The voice of the other woman played, and Oliver froze. The evidence was obtained by a detective agency. They approached the woman, kindly informed her that Oliver was married, and recorded what she had to say. The woman proudly claimed that Oliver was in the midst of divorce proceedings, and once he kicked out his wife, they would live together in Oliver's apartment. Oliver told his affair partner he wanted to divorce, but I wouldn't agree, and after being worn out by the in-laws, I would quietly leave. The affair partner believed she was the only one Oliver loved, thinking the marriage had already cooled off. True love will prevail, she laughed. But when she realized she was talking to someone from a detective agency, she panicked and started to cover for herself. She claimed she was also deceived by Oliver, truly believing the marriage was over. She begged for forgiveness, promising to tell everything. The detective asked me what to do, and upon saying it depended on what she said, she spilled everything not even asked for. All of that was recorded. I guess true love seems quite fragile. Yes, I got the evidence. Looks like this is going to cost a pretty penny in damages. Oliver collapsed weakly onto the floor. Your stuff is already sent to that woman's condo, so you can start living there from today. Now, leave. I called the concierge again and had Oliver, who was still drained, thrown out. As promised, I decided not to delve further into the affair partner. Her testimony was enough to prove Oliver's maliciousness. Thanks to that, I was able to get a substantial amount in damages from Oliver. It was enough to forgive him. However, I made sure to inform the woman's parents and her company. I hadn't promised not to tell anyone, so it should be fine to talk. The woman was Oliver's junior at work. They got close as they worked together. It would have been a nice story if they weren't married. I complained to the company about what kind of employee training they were providing, which led to our divorce. The company apologized for the lack of supervision. Concerned about their social reputation, the company made the woman resign under the guise of voluntary resignation. Oliver was demoted and transferred from the head office to a subsidiary as a punishment. During work hours, the two of them would concoct lies about sales meetings and sneak off to hotels, or take trips together and claim them as business expenses. Given the harm they caused the company, such actions seemed justified to them. I heard through the grapevine that the in-laws are now living together in her apartment for real. It's your fault things have ended up like this, take responsibility. That's what they say, squatting in the condominium where Oliver and the woman live. Oliver and the woman had to take out loans to pay me compensation. Now they live a difficult life, struggling every day to repay their debt. It might be about time to finally kick the in-laws out, I suppose. Oliver thought I was just some pitiful woman, burdened with grandparents who were in a care facility, but the reality was a bit different. My grandparents were indeed in a facility, but it was a luxurious place where wealthy people live gracefully. They used to run a company and had planned to pass it on to my parents, but they died young. so they retired after handing it over to someone they could trust. That was the year I graduated from college. I've loved drawing since I was a child and have won numerous awards for it. I told my grandparents I wanted to work in art, so they never forced me to take over the company. They decided to move into that facility so I could live freely as I wished. I followed my dreams into a career related to art, and now I'm becoming known as a children's book author. My illustrated books have become a big hit, and I'm now somewhat of a celebrity. I feel like my luck has turned around dramatically since splitting up with Oliver. He must be regretting it by now. I bought that high-rise apartment with the money from selling that condo, my parents' inheritance, and my book royalties. I wanted to live with my grandparents again while they were still healthy. Of course, I'm keeping the facility as an option. It's necessary for when either of my grandparents becomes physically incapacitated and needs extensive care. But for now, they're both still healthy. Thanks to my book sales, I can finally give back to my grandparents. We can live happily together for a while longer. Though I went through some hardships because of that man, my future is looking bright. Luis' house is ours now. Get out. After Luis, my father-in-law, passed away, my husband Dennis started claiming my childhood home for himself and his parents, saying things out of turn. Don't you guys know? Hearing Dennis' shallow words made me go beyond dismay to laughter. My retaliation against Dennis, who had looked down on me, sent his family to rock bottom. I am Madonna. I lived with my husband Dennis and my father Luis. My mother passed away when I was in high school, and afterward, my father raised me with a lot of love. I love my father dearly. When my father became elderly, over 70, and I was worried about him, Dennis readily agreed to live together in my childhood home. Are you sure this is okay? I can manage on my own, you know. My father worriedly said to me. What he was talking about was living together with me and Dennis. Recently, when I suggested to my father that I wanted to live together, he initially looked happy but then became concerned quickly. I appreciate it, but won't I be a burden on your and Dennis' life? My father always worried about me first. However, when I told him that I wanted to be with him and that Dennis had agreed, my father smiled and happily agreed. And today is the moving day for me and Dennis. We are unpacking the boxes that the movers brought in. Come on. You're saying it again. I told you before that's what I wanted, right? Yes, Luis. Plus, it's closer to work from here, and it helps me out too. My father smiled a little and said, I see, when Dennis and I told him this. After unpacking for a while, we went to the living room, where my father had made us warm coffee. I was about to have coffee when I heard someone coming down the stairs. I thought you might be taking a break, so I prepared some for you and Dennis as well. Tired, Dennis and I gratefully accepted and took a break, chatting with my father. Watching us, I felt our future life would be more enjoyable than before, which made me happy. After resting for a while, Dennis and I went back to our room to continue unpacking. Rolling up our sleeves, we motivated ourselves to push a little further. Hey, you can quit your job if you want. Stay by Luis' side. While working, Dennis made an unexpected suggestion. I stopped, surprised. What? What do you mean? Because, by living here, we've reduced the rent we used to pay. So, you could quit your job and take care of Luis, talk to him. It'd give you peace of mind, right? Currently, Dennis and I both work, and I handle the household chores. Dennis helps with the chores occasionally, but it's been quite busy nonetheless. I was a bit troubled by Dennis' suggestion and told him I'd think about it. Indeed, having more time to be with my father was appealing. And the thought of being able to focus on household chores seemed to lessen my burden. Dennis' proposal was attractive, but it meant relying on his income, which worried me about becoming a burden on him. Dennis had already agreed to the cohabitation. Could I rely on him even more? With our living situation changing from today, I decided to keep living as we had been for the time being. Dennis told me not to push myself, but the cohabitation was my suggestion. I felt I couldn't always depend on Dennis. A month passed. Hey, maybe you should quit your job for Louis' sake after all? When Dennis suggested this again, I was already considering it might be better. Living together had actually lessened my burden, not increased it. Because my father was helping with the household chores. Thinking of preparing dinner on my way home, I'd find my father had already cooked or cleaned, which seemed to increase his burden instead. Feeling guilty about this situation, I had been contemplating quitting my job. Yeah, maybe I will. I'm sorry to put the financial burden on you, Dennis. What are you talking about? Don't worry about it. With that, I decided to quit my job. When I told my father, he said he'd take care of the household chores and that I should not worry about working. But when I insisted that I wanted to do the chores, he thought for a moment and then agreed. Since quitting my job, I've been able to focus on household duties. Spending more time with my father has enriched our days. However, things gradually began to change. Welcome back. You must be tired today. Is dinner ready? Dennis started coming home late, and with my father already asleep by the time he returned, the three of us had fewer meals together. Today, I was watching TV with Dad and... Can you be quiet while eating? Oh, sorry. Dennis is as kind as ever when my father is around, but lately, he's become very cold when it's just the two of us. Thinking I might be burdening him since I quit my job, all I can do is apologize. After finishing his meal, Dennis gets up to prepare his usual after-dinner drink, then suddenly decides to leave the dining room. Where are you going? What about your drink? Shower. He says curtly and leaves, closing the door roughly behind him. Not knowing if he's just in a bad mood or tired, these days have been so continuous that I can't help but sigh. The next day, as usual, I wait for Dennis to come home after my father has gone to bed, but he doesn't return even after midnight. Worried, I try calling him, but he doesn't answer his phone. Just as I'm getting really concerned, a message arrives. What? Even the text feels cold. I sigh again, relieved that he's at least safe. Still at work? I was worried because it's so late. He responds quickly. On a business trip. The reply is short. But from this, I understand he won't be coming home today. I hadn't heard anything about a business trip and think he should have told me earlier, but I also worry that mentioning it might upset him more. So, you're on a business trip? Got it. When will you be back? I send this, but get no reply. After that, Dennis's business trips seem to increase, without him telling me when he'd be leaving or when he'd return. My father worries too, and when Dennis is home, asks him if everything is okay. I'm totally fine. Just working hard for the family. Dennis responds with a bright smile he no longer shows me. Seeing this, I wonder if he's upset with me. I try to talk about it, but he dismisses it, saying he's just busy or tired, and we never really have a proper discussion. Eventually, Dennis hardly comes home at all. Suspicious, I start to wonder if he's having an affair when suddenly, I receive a message from Dennis's mother, Cecile, after a long time. Give me Dennis's company address. The message is blunt, without any greeting. Since the beginning of our marriage, my in-laws haven't liked me, often making snide remarks or harassing me, so over time, I've distanced myself from them, although Dennis understood and it never affected our relationship. But we never attempted to mend things, so the relationship remained distant. Puzzled by Cecile's abrupt message, I reply, "It's been a while. May I ask why you need Dennis's company address?" This seems to upset her, as she calls me, angry. "Hello. It's been a while." It's not been a while. You've had Dennis looking after your father and quit your job to do no housework at all. What's this about? Because of you, Dennis has been staying at our house. He forgot something today and was going to drop it off at his company. And you're acting like this. Unbelievable. Give me the address now. Also, from now on, Dennis will be living with us. Stunned by Cecile's barrage, I learned Dennis had been going back to his parents' house on the days he said he was on business trips. Shocked that he had told his parents such things, I feel betrayed. Despite him saying it was okay for me to quit my job and to stay by my father's side, realizing Dennis's true feelings was heartbreaking. Unable to argue, I give Cecile Dennis's company address and hang up. Trying to calm down, I'm making coffee in the living room when my father comes in. Smiling as usual, I ask him, "Want some coffee?" He looks at me closely, smiles, and says, "I might just take you up on that." As we sit drinking coffee together, my father starts to talk. "When your mom and I were younger, we used to argue a lot. Misunderstandings, miscommunications, but we always resolved them by talking honestly. Maybe couples who can argue and fix their relationship are better off, understanding each other more deeply and getting along better." Listening to my father, it feels like he sees right through me. His words resonate with me, and I decide to have a proper talk with Dennis. "Yeah. Thanks, Dad." When I told my father, he laughed. Then, after receiving a message from Cecile, I sent Dennis a message saying I wanted to talk. However, Dennis replied that it was too much trouble, making me sigh. Who's making it troublesome? Anger towards Dennis started to bubble up. I wanted to reply impulsively, but I took a deep breath to remain calm. Maybe that triggered it, but Dennis stopped giving me money for living expenses. He wouldn't answer my calls anymore, and my messages about the living expenses were ignored too. His selfish actions were making my love for him fade. Was there any point in staying married? The thought of divorce crossed my mind. I was disillusioned with Dennis for being so irresponsible and selfish. But not wanting to worry my father further, I put the thought of divorce on hold and decided to use my savings from before I was married to get by. I had gotten used to life without Dennis, enjoying my days with my father. Then one day, my father collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, where I was told he didn't have long left. I broke down crying there, unable to comprehend the doctors' and nurses' words. When I went to my father's room, he was conscious, forcing a smile and apologizing for worrying me. I took his hand, trying my best to smile back despite my swollen eyes. "What kind of face is that?" My father laughed, looking sad, making me feel like crying again. Since my father would be hospitalized, I went home to prepare some changes of clothes. Alone at home, I started crying again. The house I grew up in, filled with too many memories, felt unbearable to be in alone. While I was crying, my phone rang. Thinking it was the hospital, I checked to find a message from Dennis. "We live separately now. Take care of your own living expenses. Why don't you use your father's pension?" The moment I read it, I threw my phone in anger. That was the moment my feelings for Dennis completely vanished. Shaking with anger and sorrow, I tried to calm down, wondering what my father would think of me now. Somewhat calmer, I washed my face and finished preparing to go back to the hospital. Just then, The mail arrived with news that seemed like a blessing to me at that moment. After seeing it, I firmed up my resolve, left the documents at home, and headed to the hospital. My father's condition worsened, and I realized our goodbye was near. I spent my days at the hospital laughing and talking with my father, and crying when I returned home. Eventually, my father passed away peacefully. I was able to watch his final moments as if he was sleeping peacefully. I was devastated but also grateful for everything he had left me. With my relatives' support, we managed to hold the funeral without issue, but Dennis and his parents never showed up. I hadn't informed them of my father's death, so I had no expectations. However, Dennis showed up days after finishing my father's posthumous affairs, nonchalantly with a lot of baggage. Long time no see. Luis passed away? Seeing Dennis, I felt a rush of anger, but managed to keep my composure. What do you want? What's with the baggage? No way to greet, huh? Isn't it obvious? Your husband is back. Also, this is my parents' stuff. Excuse me? Hearing the word husband from Dennis was extremely unpleasant. I couldn't believe someone who had left on his own, stopped contributing to our living expenses, and lived as he pleased dared to refer to himself as my husband. You were waiting for me, right? No job, struggling with living expenses, and having to take care of your father alone. Speechless with joy? Or rather, you fell for my plan. Dennis mentioned a plan that caught my attention, and I asked what he meant. The unbelievable response came back. Luis moving in? I hated that idea. Living with Luis? You must be joking. But if I said that, you might consider divorce. And if we divorced, I wouldn't get this house. So, I moved in with the act of a loving husband, made you jobless, to ensure you and Luis would depend on me. That way, this house would become mine. Hearing this, I found myself glaring at Dennis unconsciously. This is not something a normal person would think of. The shame of having married such a person, and the overwhelming guilt towards my father made me tremble with frustration. You say that yet you leave and stop providing for us. Isn't that contradictory? At that, Dennis began scratching his head, looking annoyed. Yeah, I reached my limit of patience. I never thought I'd be such a short-tempered man. But I thought you wouldn't have the courage to divorce, so my plan would still succeed even without me. His smirk made me wonder what I ever saw in him. I don't want to see his face or hear his voice anymore. Dennis had become physically repulsive to me. And so, my plan succeeded. This house might be old, but it's spacious and in a good location. It'll be worth a lot when sold. From today, I'll live here with my parents. It's rare to find someone so selfish. He must have never learned about morality. Well, considering his parents, it's not surprising. As I stood there in silent disbelief, Dennis, thinking I was shocked, added insult to injury. I'll take Luis's house. Get out. Watching the in-laws' belongings being moved in, I realized Dennis had no grasp of our situation. Dennis looked down on me with disdain. After his appalling comments about my father, I couldn't let this go. I found myself unable to hold back laughter at Dennis's ridiculous statements. Surprised by my sudden laughter, Dennis looked puzzled. Have you lost your mind? That's my line. The thought of confronting him with reality made me laugh uncontrollably. As Dennis began to rage, I ignored him and stated the facts. Do you guys not know? This is my house. It will never be yours. My words left Dennis frozen, and I went for the kill. Besides, you and I are strangers now. Haven't you heard from Cecile? Laughing, I watched as Dennis was left speechless. and then began to make a call. It seemed he was calling Cecile. "Mom? Madonna's saying something nonsensical. We're not divorced, right? She said you should know. What's that about?" "What? You sent it? What have you done?" Listening to Dennis, it seemed he was beginning to grasp the situation. Dennis ended the call with a twisted face. "You filed for divorce?" "Yes. Exactly. The day your father was hospitalized. Cecile sent the completed divorce papers by mail, and I was so happy I sent them back the next day. Cecile did something nice. Darn. Even if it arrived, you shouldn't have sent it. Mom said to write it just in case. I never intended to divorce." "Well, you filled it out, didn't you? I don't know about your intentions. I just granted your wish for divorce. You should be thanking me." Seeing Dennis so frustrated was satisfying. Cecile must have sent it to harass me, but to me, contemplating divorce that day, the arrival of the divorce papers was great news. Afterward, Dennis, panicking about property division and claiming rights to the house because he moved in with my father, was easily rebutted. Knowing there wasn't much to divide since the property wasn't valuable and was in my father's name at the time of the divorce, I explained it wasn't subject to division. When Dennis desperately claimed my personal savings from before our marriage should be divided, I clarified that too was not subject to division. Dennis turned pale, unable to respond, his mouth moving like a goldfish. I was tempted to mock him further, but I composed myself for a more mature response. "Can we stop this now? Bringing so much stuff into someone else's house is troublesome, and frankly, it's trespassing. If you plan to stay any longer, I'll have to call the police." When I said that, Dennis hurriedly started moving his things out and left as if fleeing. I closed the door and, looking at a photo of my parents, murmured, "This is for the best. I'll become stronger, so watch over me." Thinking about whether my parents had reunited in heaven eased the sadness, and strangely, the loneliness dissipated. I gathered my resolve and started looking for a job. Just then, a friend contacted me. They had heard I was job hunting and reached out. They had a job in mind that suited my expertise. I was introduced and interviewed by HR, and was hired on the spot. A few days later, Dennis sent a message. "I was stubborn last time, my bad. I actually wanted to make things right with you, that's why I came to the house." Knowing it was all lies, I struggled with how to respond, eventually finding it too bothersome and choosing to ignore it. Despite my silence, a series of poem-like messages began to arrive. "We were like the sun and moon back then. I reached out but couldn't touch you. Those days of struggle are now memories. We can be within reach now, right? I can't go on without your love. Won't you give me that glowing love once more? My life is yours. You mean everything to me. Our love is eternal. No matter where, I will continue to love you. Your heart is where I belong." Each time a poem arrived, I showed it to my colleagues, wondering if it could be used for work. I work in editing. Sometimes, phrases like these can be useful. "Ah, here comes the emotionally unstable stalker. Great material when I'm out of ideas." Dennis has become a source of content, unbeknownst to him. But his messages only fill me with disgust, so I don't reply. Then one day, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Dennis. Thinking he had finally escalated to a direct approach, I called the police immediately. "Hey! I know you're there. I can see your car. Please, just hear me out. I'm really in trouble here. There was talk of moving into this house, and my parents seem to have sold our family home. I have nowhere to go. Please help. Despite his pleas from outside, it's a stranger's problem to me, not mine. Didn't he realize this wasn't his home when he didn't retract his claim after finding out? The messages sent showed he hadn't given up, but his and his family's naivety was astonishing. Soon, the police arrived and had to persuade Dennis, who resisted fiercely and was eventually taken away. Messages continued to flood in, and when I ignored them, my in-laws began contacting me. Initially, they called, but as I ignored them, they resorted to messaging. How could you know we're in trouble and not help? Call us back immediately. Why not have a proper discussion once? We were family, after all. Isn't this too cold? We had to sell our home because of you, now living in an old apartment. Why won't you vacate the house? You received an inheritance from your father, right? We quit our jobs, expecting not to struggle. Take responsibility. Herman, my Raphael, said this, and it was clear the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Did they really think their decisions would just work out? Their messages were infuriating. How much more could they belittle people? I had planned to ignore them, but ended up blocking Dennis and my in-laws. I considered changing my contact information, but didn't want to go that far because of them. I was at my limit of patience. After blocking them, I hoped for a peaceful life, but my expectations were naive. Later, my former in-laws showed up at my house. As much as I wanted them to stop, being known made such situations inevitable. Yet, leaving this house full of memories was unthinkable. Come out already! Don't you know we're in trouble? Fix your mood already. I'm saying we should get back together. Ignoring someone in trouble is questionable behavior for anyone. The doorbell kept ringing. The front door was being pounded on. I had called the police without mercy, but then suddenly, the noise stopped. Curious, I looked through the peephole and saw a man, familiar somehow, arguing with my former in-laws. More than talking, it seemed like a confrontation. You're causing trouble. Go home, all of you. The former in-laws were unsettled by the sudden appearance of the man. What did you say? Who are you, anyway? Could you be the affair partner? Despite being taken aback, the former in-laws retorted, to which the man responded with a look of disdain. That kind of thinking is why nobody takes you seriously. Do you see your surroundings? This is a residential area. Look, your disturbance has drawn a crowd. It's really loud. Although I could only see so much through the peephole, indeed, neighbors had started to gather. This is embarrassing for me too, I sighed. However, realizing their predicament, the former in-laws started panicking, stuttering. But. By then, the police had arrived. It seemed one of the officers had been here before, as they recognized Dennis and said, "You again?" Hearing this, the former in-laws' faces turned bright red. Do you realize how much trouble you're causing? Have some shame, the man said before leaving. Internally, I thanked him, feeling a bit relieved. Afterwards, the former in-laws were escorted away by the police amidst onlookers, who then dispersed. Hours later, the doorbell rang again, and peering through the peephole, I saw the man who had confronted my former in-laws. Surprised, I hesitated but eventually, cautiously opened the door to find the man smiling at me. It's been a while. If you were back, you should have told me. Though the man looked familiar, I couldn't place him until he offered a clue. Can't remember? Well, it has been over 10 years. It's me, Charles. Hearing the name jogged my memory. My childhood friend Charlie, or Charles. What? Charlie. Now that you mention it, I can see the resemblance. Charles was a childhood friend who lived next door, but we hadn't seen each other since he transferred to a sports-focused elementary school. Remembered, huh? I've moved back home too. So, we're neighbors again. That's amazing. It's been so long. And thank you for earlier. You really helped me out. As I expressed my gratitude again, Charles laughed. Don't mention it, he said, making me smile in appreciation. Caught up in nostalgia, our conversation grew lively, and I shared the recent events with him. Charles offered his support anytime, giving me a strong ally. Upon learning of my father's passing, Charles brought flowers as a tribute. He remembered my father, even though we were just kids back then. I was delighted to have someone with shared memories in my life. Later, I received a letter from a lawyer in the mail. Without any clue what it was about, I opened the envelope to find several papers inside. The documents claimed I had committed adultery during my marriage and demanded compensation. What is this? I wondered, noticing an unread message on my phone. It was a message from an address I didn't recognize. The message, from an unknown address, stated that my ex-husband, Dennis, had filed a lawsuit for adultery during our marriage. It threatened to inform my workplace unless I admitted guilt and settled immediately. Knowing no legitimate lawyer would send such a letter, it was clear this was the work of my former in-laws. The letter's authenticity was doubtful, so I decided to consult a real law firm. A genuine lawyer confirmed the letter was a complete fake. The supposed lawyer's name was unregistered, confirming my suspicions. Though I considered ignoring it, I decided to feign falling for their trick. I've reviewed the content, but I can't recall any such incident. If you're accusing me of adultery, please provide evidence. You seem... But the emotional damage to Dennis is substantial, and the claim is for compensation for that. No lawyer would proceed without evidence. It was clear they were operating on scant knowledge. There's no fact of infidelity, so of course, there's no evidence. You mention emotional damage, but do lawyers act on such baseless claims? Dennis's plight has moved me, and I've taken on your case with the intention of helping. If you show some sincerity, we don't intend to make a big deal out of this. Quite an emotional lawyer, aren't you? Just to confirm, though you're probably aware, it's illegal for someone to impersonate a lawyer, with potential jail time or fines depending on the case. You are a real lawyer, right? After that exchange, the previously prompt replies stopped. Wondering what their next move would be, I received a message. Of course, I'm real, but I've been persuaded by your passion. We've decided to drop the lawsuit. No, don't bother dropping it on my account. I have no such passion, quite the opposite, in fact. Since you've fabricated this affair, I'm inclined to fight this fully and am considering hiring a lawyer myself. I look forward to seeing you in court. After my reply, there was no further contact. Though the messages stopped, the former in-laws again made a direct assault, screaming at my front door about how they were wrong and begging me to drop the lawsuit. Awoken by the commotion, I checked the time to find it was past 1 a.m. Frustrated and at my limit, I yelled, "Enough! Stay away from me forever!" as I flung open the door. The former in-laws, having never seen me so enraged, were stunned. Toxic family. Try anything else and see what happens. Saying this, I grabbed my father's wooden sword that was by the door. Seeing the sword, the in-laws' faces turned pale, with Dennis muttering an apology. "If you're sorry, then disappear. Don't ever come back." I yelled even louder, causing Cecile to tear up, looking like she might cry. Then, I saw police car lights approaching, indicating that the neighborhood had called them due to the late-hour disturbance. As they were taken away, Cecile desperately pointed at me, telling the police, "That person! They tried to hit us with a wooden sword." When the police turned to me, asking if that was true, I explained. I was just startled by the incessant doorbell ringing and knocking, thinking it was an intruder. I had the wooden sword for self-defense. The officers seemed convinced. Charles, who had been nearby and witnessed their frequent assaults, vouched for me. His testimony, along with their malicious behavior, led to their swift arrest. It was finally quiet. The next day, encouraged by Charles, I filed a complaint. Given the repeated police incidents, it was smoothly accepted. Charles had noticed the previous day's commotion and had come over, hearing my shouts. He later joked about how terrifying I sounded. Eventually, the former in-laws were issued a restraining order, halting their attacks. Moreover, someone had recorded the commotion and posted it online, leading to neighborhood gossip. Unable to move due to financial constraints, they likely live off the grandparents' pensions. As for me, my relationship with Charles quickly evolved, and after a few months, we started dating following his confession. Spending time with Charles, always making me laugh and showing kindness, felt incredibly fortunate. I'm thankful every day, considering it a blessing from my father.
Lying sprawled out in the middle of a night road, like a petulant child, my sister-in-law yelled out loud. "I just gave him a chance. He's trying to give up his right to monopolize me. I'm teaching him that's such a waste." She's so overconfident, it's almost like a sickness. A sickness. I don't need that kind of right. Can't you see that John is rejecting this right of yours? It's pitiful, really sad. Your misery is laughable. Are you still going to expose it here? Aren't you embarrassed? After being harshly scolded by me, sister-in-law finally stood up and lunged at me. Not smart at all. No way she could win. I'm Sarah, 32 years old and single. I work at a hotel. My job is as important to me as a lover in my life. My father has passed away, and I live with my mother at our family home. My younger brother, 2 years my junior, married his classmate at 20 and now lives in another state. Our family's long-standing problem is his wife, named Rebecca. She's, well, a free spirit. That hasn't changed since she first came to our home. I'll never forget the words she uttered at our first meeting. "I'm marrying John. Oh, there are sweets. But I really like those big cream puffs they sell at the convenience store right now. I don't want these, so please go buy me some cream puffs." My parents were dumbstruck. So was I. Oh, brother, why did you fall for her? Rebecca is flashy in appearance, with dyed hair and eyelash extensions, not to mention her flashy nails. But considering her awful personality, the flashy appearance seems like just an add-on. John, my brother, used to say, "I find her whimsical nature cute." But I think it's too much. Really, why did he fall for her? I couldn't help but harbor such doubts. Following that, her behavior during the wedding and house hunting was just a series of whims. "I'm only wearing a brand new dress. Nothing else is acceptable. I mean, I am the bride, right? Logically, that's correct. What's a deposit? In my theory, it's weird to pay for something like that when I'm doing them a favor by renting their house." My brother's wife frequently spins these mysterious Rebecca theories, bewildering everyone around her. In her world, whatever she thinks is right is absolutely right. During her pregnancy, she ignored everyone's warnings and went swimming in the sea. She doesn't care about the designated days for trash disposal. In meals, she eats only the parts she likes and leaves the rest. Frankly speaking, she's inconsiderate and selfish. Then, on a day leading up to summer, my mother Katie spoke to me with a troubled look. "This summer, Rebecca and the grandkids are coming to stay with us." Really? My brother has 4 kids, ages 7, 5, 4, and 2. All boys. They're full of energy, mischievous in a cute, kid-like way. Their visit will surely turn mine and Mom's quiet life into a lively and noisy one. But, well, as cute as my nephews are, their mother, my Rebecca, is not cute at all. Adorable nephews and the troublesome Rebecca, to accept them or not. Is the whole family coming? How long are they staying? That's the thing, John isn't coming. Mom made a troubled face. Really? He's not coming? Just the wife and nephews? Rebecca, the whimsical one, and the 4 energetic brothers alone. Rebecca is slightly less capricious when my brother is watching. John acts as a stopper for her whims. The thought of him not coming filled me with anxiety. Maybe we should decline this visit. Can't we say no to Rebecca's visit? It's a bit too much for me and you. Well, there are some reasons. Just listen. Mom explained a plan to me. I understood the situation. If that's the case, it can't be helped. I'll help as much as I can. I arranged with the hotel where I work to have more shifts from early morning to evening while my nephews are here. And so, the summer vacation arrived. The day started with a clear sky, the refreshing blue feeling exhilarating. My 4 nephews came into our house with all their noisy energy. They rushed into the living room, one after the other. While smiling at their cuteness, I asked the eldest, "Tired from the long trip? Where's Mom?" "She said she's going to Olive Garden and drove off." "What?" It seemed my brother's wife had dropped the 4 kids off and then immediately left for Olive Garden. Wait a minute, I didn't hear about this. When is she coming back? I don't know. Rebecca's strange behavior had already begun, and the youngest nephew is just 2 years old, leaving small children and driving off without even making sure they entered the house. While I was still in shock, the younger kids' shouts pierced my ears. What now? The nephew's eyes sparkled at the sight of snacks Mom had offered. "Candy! Awesome! Can we really eat all this? Won't Grandma get mad?" Their eyes shone with joy as if they'd found treasure, but none of them touched the sweets. Mom smiled and handed out juice to my nephews. "You can eat. These are prepared just for you." Wow, awesome. Mom never gives us candy. She eats it all herself. We can only eat meat and sweets when Dad is around. She says luxuries aren't for kids. We must never tell Mom that we ate candy. Really? My nephews took turns speaking, and I cringed at their words. What has Rebecca been telling these kids? I glanced at Mom. She too looked troubled. The shocking behavior of my nephews continued. They wrapped candy in tissues and hid it in their bags, saving it for when Rebecca wouldn't be around. When a cup tipped over, spilling water, they all turned pale and, sitting on the floor, "Sorry, please don't be mad. Don't hit us." He began to cry. When I turned on the air conditioning as the temperature rose, they dramatically thanked me. Apparently, Rebecca calls this discipline, forcing the kids into such behavior. Watching my nephews, I felt a pang in my chest. This isn't discipline. Rebecca's parenting must be causing deep psychological harm to the children. Mom and I reassured them repeatedly that they didn't need to do these things. I couldn't hold back my complaints about Rebecca. A calm discussion seemed impossible. I had to be direct. But since dropping off the kids, Rebecca hadn't shown up at our house once. Night fell, then morning came, and night again. Rebecca remained out of touch for a whole week. I even contacted my brother, but he just asked us to keep the kids a little longer. I was on the verge of exploding, but Rebecca didn't show up until 10 days later. At 5 p.m., after finishing my work, I was preparing dinner with Mom and the nephews when we heard an engine at the front door. Loud car stereo music echoed into the house. A few seconds after the engine and music stopped, our front door opened. "Everybody, Mom's here." "It's hot. Where's the beer?" It was Rebecca. She was tanned. Her thin thighs peeking from her short skirt were as thin as my upper arms. Her appearance screamed, "I've been enjoying my vacation," and in my head, a gong for battle rang. Excuse me, who are you? Oh, Sarah, starting with dementia already. Rebecca laughed, then cast a cold glance at the nephews. Hey, I said, where's the beer? The boys shriveled up, huddled in a corner, their faces hardened, a stark contrast to their earlier joy while peeling onions. Move it! Get me a beer! Rebecca's shouting scared the nephews. I quickly stepped between Rebecca and the boys. We don't have beer in our house. You knew I was coming and you didn't prepare beer? Are you stupid? The only stupid one here is you. Mom, please take the kids outside. Mom nodded. Rebecca, eyes narrowed, lunged at me. What's your problem? Who do you think you are talking like that? She came at me, so self-defense is totally justified, right? I firmly grabbed Rebecca's arm. Between her twig-like thinness and my hotel-earned strength, I clearly had the upper hand. While we struggled, Mom quickly took the boys outside. Ouch! Let go! You're strong like a gorilla. Even a gorilla would raise those kids better than you. I heard you treat them like they're just a waste of food. And what about you, not working? Just leaving your kids and gallivanting around? You're the worst. Where have you even been? I'm young. I'm allowed to have fun. My husband earns enough, so I don't need to work. Jealous, Sarah? You're just an old, unmarried lady. How long do you plan to be young? You're 30, right? Face reality. You're only 2 years younger than me. Rebecca's face turned red with anger, and she forcefully shook off my grip. She stumbled and fell backwards. Ow! I'm so hurt. I might be bedridden. Give me your bed and bring me beer. You sleep in the storage room. Sleep wherever you want. I had more to say, but it was pointless. Talking to Rebecca is like talking to a wall. I silently went to my room and packed a bag. Returning to the living room, I found Rebecca rummaging through the fridge. She can move just fine, apparently. Without looking at her, I said, I'm going back to my parents' house then. Turning my back on Rebecca's foolish voice, I stormed out of the house. My destination was the hotel where I work, an establishment with 80 years of history. My job as my lover, my workplace as my second home. What's wrong with that? Mom and the nephews had arrived at the hotel before me, waiting. Sorry to keep you waiting. Is everyone here? The nephews seemed uncomfortable in their first visit to a real hotel. I puffed out my chest proudly in front of them. We're all staying here tonight. Here? In this amazing place? Leave it to Aunt Sarah. I'd asked the owner in advance to let us stay if Rebecca visited and I needed to get the nephews away. He kindly agreed, concerned about the boys' treatment by Rebecca. It's the off-season in summer here, so there's always room to spare. No worries about finding a place to stay. There's a pool and a spa. We're allowed to use them. Really? The nephew's eyes sparkled. Quietly, so they couldn't hear, Mom whispered to me, John is almost home. Rebecca's car GPS isn't moving, so he'll start now. I nodded at Mom's whisper. Hoping my brother would handle things well, I led Mom and the nephews to their rooms for the night. The nephews were a bit overwhelmed by their first experience in a luxury hotel. A young chef prepared a simple meal for us on short notice. We were surprised, planning to eat out, but it was deliciously made in a rush, a testament to a professional skill. Thinking about how this was the work of a young chef, I felt bright about our hotel's future. The delicious meal filled the nephews' bellies, and they regained their usual energy. After much excitement, they fell asleep as soon as they hit the bed. Mom dozed off while putting them to sleep. I stepped out alone for a drink from the vending machine. I checked my mobile phone, wondering about John and Rebecca. And just then, John called. Perfect timing. I tapped the call button. Hello, John. Sarah, sorry for the trouble. How were the kids? All good? John sounded tired, but concerned about the kids first, an apology in his voice. He's doing well as an adult, and as a parent, I think. So different from Rebecca. We're fine here. They're happily resting now, already asleep. What happened on your end? Well, it went as planned. You taking the kids and letting Rebecca be free helped. I got the freedom to move and collected evidence. Got her going to a hotel with a man and being affectionate in the car. All on camera. Quiet anger laced John's voice. Rebecca had been shady for a while, sensitive about message notifications, and speaking sweetly on the phone. Started treating the kids terribly too. There were always unexplained expenses, but her recent spending was excessive. She knew too much about new leisure facilities, but she was sly, never leaving evidence for John. That's when he consulted Mom, planned to catch Rebecca's infidelity this summer, and wanted help for the divorce. Mom's hesitant answer when I asked if John was coming was because of this. My brother took the day off work to coincide with Rebecca's visit to our house and followed her. He had secretly installed a GPS in the car to track her. Relying on it, he trailed her and gathered evidence. His goal was achieved. All my restraint in not exploding at Rebecca was worth it. That's tough. Good job. So did Rebecca admit to cheating? But with Rebecca's personality, I doubted she'd admit her faults. How did John manage it? More like she had to. She hopped between multiple men in those 10 days. Faced with photos of her with different guys, she couldn't deny it. Wait, she had more than one affair partner? Yeah, kept saying it was just fun, not serious. But I told her I couldn't stay married to someone who plays around with so many men. She cried, begging not to divorce, not wanting to pay compensation. It's almost funny now. Typical Rebecca, self-centered to the core. Her ability to think and scream so selfishly is almost a talent. What's Rebecca doing now? She's lying spread eagle in front of the house, screaming her head off. It's such a nuisance to the neighbors. I just called the police. I'm coming over. It must be hard for you to handle this alone. When I arrived at the house, the police were already there, surrounding Rebecca, who was still lying on the ground, loudly insisting her point of view. I'm saying if you don't want a divorce, I'll stop making a scene. Just say you won't divorce me, John. Why can't you understand? After leaving your kids for 10 days to hop between men, you have no right to act so high and mighty. No! Please stop yelling. It's late at night. Rebecca, sprawled and throwing a tantrum, was a sorry sight. John and the officers were at a loss. Married women, get more attention! Men, flock to me! Let me have my fun! Her statement was absurd. I approached calmly and raised my voice. That just means without being married, you think you have no appeal. Rebecca glared sharply at my sudden appearance. I could see John's relief. Tired, huh? Leave it to your big sister. No sane person would deal with a foolish, selfish old lady like you. You're not having fun. You're being played. What did you say? Rebecca's face flushed with anger. Maybe something hit a nerve. If you think I'm wrong, go to those men now. You'll either be rejected or dumped. Afraid of that, so you can't leave here? Huh? That's not true. I was just giving John a chance. He's throwing away his right to have me all to himself. I'm teaching him it's a waste. Her overconfidence is sickening. No one needs that right. John rejected that right. It's pitiful. You don't feel embarrassed showing this pathetic face here? Rebecca stood up, fists raised, but a strong officer prevented her from lashing out at me. After struggling with the police, Rebecca reluctantly lowered her fists. You can't win against them, you know. How foolish. How foolish. She silently got into her car and drove off. I sighed as her car sped away. Then John murmured quietly, She was drinking earlier. That might be drunk driving. What? Hearing John, an officer got into his car and took off after her. She'll probably be caught soon. She was caught quickly, predictably. Upon seeing the police following her, "Did you chase me because you were attracted to me? Fallen for me?" Rebecca exclaimed. The police methodically arrested her for driving under the influence, thankfully before she caused an accident. I'm grateful to the police for preventing more victims of Rebecca's twisted logic. Even after her arrest, Rebecca kept making selfish excuses. Non-cooperative and a flight risk, she was detained and charged. Once released, Rebecca returned to her parents' home. Afterwards, Rebecca's parents sent a completed divorce application to my brother. He filed the papers, thus severing his ties with her. Currently, my brother and his ex-wife are in court over compensation. The ex-wife claims it's unfair that she's the only one being asked for compensation, insisting that all her boyfriends should also share the burden and confess to every single one of her relationships. My brother has left everything to his lawyer, confident of winning without much effort. Strangely, she's also seeking damages from her boyfriends. I'm not sure how well that will pan out, but I suspect it won't go well. As for custody, my brother smoothly secured it. He brought the kids back to our family home. He found a new job locally and is happily living with mom and the children. As for me, I found love. The guy is the young chef who prepared meals for my nephews and me when we sought refuge in the hotel. He developed a fondness for me after seeing how I eagerly ate the hastily prepared food and played wholeheartedly with the nephews. It's a bit embarrassing to date a colleague, but our co-workers are happy for us. Soon, I'll be moving out of my family home to live with him. He's certainly captured my heart through my stomach. I'm really excited about starting this new chapter of my life. I'll definitely make you happy. He grips my hand with a strong force, his eyes brimming with tears as he makes his vow. I respond with a gentle smile. With him, who cares so deeply for his sick mom, I'm sure we can build a warm family. I believe we'll be able to show our great-grandchildren to our grandparents. Ignoring a slight feeling of discomfort, I accept his proposal. My name is Grace. I'm a 27-year-old caregiver working in a nursing home. Having lost my parents in an accident when I was young, I was raised by my maternal grandparents and still live with them. My grandmother is playful but serious at heart, always scolding me if I do something against morals. In contrast, my grandfather has a face like a wise old man, always gently patting my head, person of great kindness. He was a business-savvy man who built up a considerable fortune, but you wouldn't know it from his demeanor at home. He teaches self-defense to kids in the neighborhood, never raising his voice, even with the naughtiest of children. As a tomboy, I used to wonder what it would take to anger my grandfather, putting frogs in his hat or giving him a homemade jack-in-the-box for his birthday. But it was always my grandmother who scolded me, while my grandfather would just laugh and stroke my head. Being healthy is what matters most, he said. Raised by such loving grandparents, I lead a fulfilling life, both at work and with friends. But there's one thing that troubles me. On a free day with no plans, enjoying my blissful time eating ice cream and watching TV, my grandmother would ask, "Grace, have you found someone nice?" Here we go again. This is her probing question, concerned about my being single. It's become almost a catchphrase, so I brush it off as usual. Nope, I'm too busy with work. Any prospects at your job? None at all. It's all women, and the patients are all grandpas and grandmas. I see. I'm looking forward to seeing my great-grandchild. I'll pass away if you don't find someone soon, Grace. I want a partner and to show my grandmother her great-grandchild. but I don't have the energy to go out looking for someone on my day off. As if to defend me, my grandfather joins the conversation. Don't worry, this chatty old lady is too noisy for God to handle, so he won't call her so soon. Grace, take your time finding the right person. Oh, Grandpa. My grandmother shifts her complaints to him. I slip out of the room, quietly thankful to my grandfather. A month later, a shadow fell over those peaceful days where we could joke so lightheartedly. My grandmother, who was supposed to be healthy, collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. Fortunately, she regained consciousness quickly and was able to come home after a short stay in the hospital, but she was left with a paralysis in her leg. Both my grandfather and I were deeply worried about her, but she continued to do household chores, dragging her leg and saying, "I'm not ready to go just yet." And she laughed. Even seeing her in such a brave light, I couldn't shake the reality I had been avoiding. My grandparents were aging, and their time was limited. I wanted to show them their great-grandchild. After my grandmother's collapse, I became more determined and started actively participating in social gatherings organized by friends. That's where I met William, a corporate employee 5 years my senior. William is a sociable and entertaining elite working for a major corporation, with many friends and shared interests with me. We hit it off immediately, and soon started hanging out, just the two of us. William showed interest in me, and I wasn't averse to him either. Then, 3 months after we met, he invited me to a restaurant with a beautiful night view. Filled with nervous anticipation, he said to me earnestly, "Grace, I want you to marry me." Marry? His proposal, skipping past the dating phase, took me by surprise. William gently grasped my hand, which hung open in shock. "I fell for you the moment I first saw you. It's so much fun being with you, and I don't think I'll ever find anyone like Grace again." Ugh, we're both not getting any younger, and it seems a waste to just date halfway. I want to get married and start a family soon. That's true, but I had imagined dating William and eventually getting married, but I never thought about such a sudden marriage proposal and couldn't find the right words to respond. Seeing my hesitation, William released my hand and smiled weakly. "Sorry, I rushed you. Actually, my mom is ill and doesn't have much time left." "Your mom?" His confession was more shocking and serious than the proposal, bringing me back to earth. "Yeah, my mom wants to see her grandchild, and I wanted to make that happen. I rushed without considering Grace's feelings. I'm sorry. I know it's troubling to hear this." "William." Looking at his somber face, my heart clenched. I remembered the shock and regret I felt when my grandmother was rushed to the hospital. He's just like me. He wants to marry to bring a smile to his family's face, just like I have a hidden desire to do the same. And I understand the pain of losing parents. That's why I found myself wanting to accept him, someone who cares so deeply for his mom. William is a bright and fun person. Together, we could surely build a happy home. With a once-in-a-lifetime resolve, I clasp my trembling hands and face William. "Okay, let's get married." William, surprised by my answer, looks up. "Really?" "Yes." Smiling reassuringly, I see his eyes well up with tears. Thank you! Thank you! I'll definitely make you happy." Caught up in this unexpected turn of events, I feel like I'm in a dream. But I decided to trust this man who values family so much. After that, William became incredibly proactive. The day after I accepted his proposal, he suggested we register our marriage immediately so we could have children whenever we wanted. Having been raised by my strict grandmother, I firmly rejected this idea, saying it was out of order. I also harbored a desire to have a ceremony and show my grandparents me in a bridal gown. William didn't give up easily. but he eventually agreed to first meet my grandparents. I had suggested meeting his family first. Mom's not well right now. He gently declined. Though I had agreed to marry him, I felt a bit uneasy about how hurriedly William was pushing things. But when he said with a smile, "I just want to be with Grace as soon as possible," I couldn't outright say it was strange. With that little bit of unease, the day William was to meet my family arrived. Greeted at the entrance, William offered his usual, refreshing smile to my grandmother. "What a fine young man, truly worthy of my granddaughter," she whispered to me, her voice filled with joy. I swelled with pride. Surely, choosing him as my marriage partner was the right decision. With confidence, I introduced him to my grandfather, who was already seated in the living room. "Grandpa, William is here." "Nice to meet you. I'm in a relationship with Grace, with the intention of marrying her." "Ah." My grandfather, rising from his seat, froze upon seeing William's face, and his usual smile vanished. "Leave, please." "What?" "I won't approve of a marriage with this man." "What? Grandpa?" Not only I, but also my grandmother was shocked by my usually gentle and supportive grandfather's outright rejection. William, too, stood with a stunned expression, having just been bluntly dismissed. "What's wrong, Grandpa? What's the problem with William?" "There's nothing specific. I just don't like the look in his eyes." "What?" I glanced at William's face. He may not be particularly handsome, but I thought he had a kind, gentle face. "Grandpa, it's not right to judge someone by their appearance." "Grace, look closely. His eyes, his smile, his mouth, they're all fake. He has the face of someone who's used to lying." "Lying?" I looked at William again, who now furrowed his brows in distress. "Grace, don't you trust me? I just want to build a happy home with you and show my mom her grandchild." His earnest plea pained my heart. "Grandpa, William is a kind man who cares deeply about his family. He's very attentive to his sick mom." "Then bring that mom here." "What?" Startled by my grandfather's outrageous demand, William visibly panicked. "That's impossible. Mom is hospitalized." "Then bring your father." "Grandpa?" As I protested, my grandfather seemed to come back to himself. "I won't approve it," and then left. Sorry about Grandpa. On the way back from my family home, I apologized to William, who walked silently ahead. "Grace, it's not your fault. I think Grandpa is just sad about his precious granddaughter being taken by a man he doesn't know." "William." His generous response reassured me, but only for a moment. "So when are we registering our marriage?" "What?" Surprised, I looked at his face, which bore the same calm smile as always. "How about the day after tomorrow?" "But Grandpa said he doesn't approve of our marriage." "Marriage is a matter between the two people involved, right? It's unfortunate that Grandpa doesn't approve, but my parents are looking forward to it." His argument seemed logical, but I remembered my grandfather's arms holding me when I couldn't sleep at night after losing my parents. I remembered his kind eyes watching me happily as I ate. My grandpa, who was always on my side. I like William, but I can't believe my grandpa would say something to hurt me. It's not that I don't trust him, but I can't shake the image of my usually gentle grandpa's stern face. I don't want to get married like this. I don't want to betray my grandpa. Sorry, but I want to wait to get married. What? William stopped in his tracks at my words. He looked down at me, laughing. What are you talking about? My mom and dad are excited about it. I'm sorry, but just like you care about your parents, my grandparents are important to me. I want their blessing if I'm going to get married. So, I desperately searched for words to make William understand. But from above, ugh! A languid sigh sounded. Old people about to kick the bucket don't matter. What? What did he just say? Stunned by William's sudden change, I stared at him as he laughed and scratched his head. When we're married, my parents will become your family. You're an orphan, naive about the world. Once married, you enter the husband's family, so opposing in-laws don't matter. Anyway, you can't go back to that house anymore. What are you saying? My confusion seemed funny to him, as his smile deepened. His smiling eyes were empty, and only the corners of his mouth creepily curled upwards. Be grateful to my mom. I'd prefer someone like a model or flight attendant, more suited to an elite like me. But when I told my mom about you, she liked you. Being a caregiver, you can take care of her. And as an orphan, you have no one to rely on, which makes it easier. That can't be. William? Ha ha ha! Laughing hysterically, William scratched his head in confusion. Feeling terrified, I instinctively stepped back, but a large hand brutally grabbed my arm. You're not getting away. Let's just go to the city hall now. Enough of this hassle. No! I tried to escape, but his grip was terrifyingly strong. However, in the next moment, the grip on my arm was gone, and William lay on the ground, screaming. Confused about what happened, we both stood in shock until I felt a firm pull on my shoulder. This damn guy! Don't you dare touch my granddaughter! Grandpa? My grandpa, who had pushed me behind him, glared at William with an intensity I had never seen. What the hell, you senile old man? William, his temples throbbing, lunged at Grandpa, but in an instant, he was flipped over and landed on the ground. Huh? Grandpa coolly looked down at William, who laid there looking dazed. Whenever William tried to attack, Grandpa skillfully knocked him down with mysterious moves. While William was breathless, he seemed unhurt. I knew Grandpa was trained in self-defense, but I never expected him to be this skilled. It was like a scene from a comedy, attracting the attention of passers-by. Before I knew it, a circle of people had formed around us, gasping each time William fell. Realizing the crowd, William looked around in shock. What the hell is this? What's with this old man? Remember this. Never come near Grace again. Damn it! You'll regret this! Muttering like a defeated villain, William crawled away. The crowd dispersed as he left. Feeling the tension dissipate, I sat down on the ground. Grandpa, Words failed me, overwhelmed by emotions, but Grandpa gently stroked my head, just like always. Later, Grandpa had a detective agency investigate William thoroughly. Turns out, William had a history of divorce. The story about his sick mother was a complete lie. In reality, his very healthy mother-in-law had tormented his ex-wife with all sorts of abuse. His father-in-law, who was bedridden, had his care entirely pushed onto his ex-wife, who barely escaped to her parents' home and filed for divorce. This happened just 6 months before he met me. Burdened with a hefty divorce settlement, William and his family saw me as the perfect new slave, especially as an orphan and caregiver. They never imagined a hidden trump card like Grandpa. Grandpa and I used the information from the detective agency and my attempted assault to legally force William to never approach me again, with the help of a lawyer, and we even received a small settlement. William and his mother, to the very end, hurled insults at me, saying, "Orphan like you." But having such parents, I thought it's better to be without them. When I asked Grandpa how he knew William's true nature, guys with eyes like his are never good news. He just laughed and said, "I was surprised that Grandpa got so angry just on a hunch, but he must have been certain William was bad news." Having expanded his company through challenging times and economic booms, my grandfather must have seen a lot of the unpleasant sides of people. Yet, He never let me feel that hardship, always smiling kindly at me. He's truly amazing. On the other hand, Grandma was so upset upon learning William's true nature that I felt sorry for her. Grace, I'm so sorry. It's all because Grandma rushed you about wanting to see your grandchildren. I gently patted her back. It's not your fault. I'm the one who couldn't see through him, and you were just worried about me being alone after you're gone. Grace? Just give me a bit more time, and I'll find someone wonderful like Grandpa. Please live long, both of you. When I smiled, Grandpa nodded heartily. Yes, Grandma will live to be 100, even 200 years old, just to see your happiness, Grandma declared, returning to her usual cheerful self, making a fist with determination. 3 years later, as I was leaving the nursing home where I work, Grace, that's you, right? A familiar voice called out. He looked more haggard and unhealthier than 3 years ago, but I recognized him. It was William, my former fiancé. Despite my obvious distaste, he approached me, looking pleased. You're still working as a caregiver? I bet no decent man would take you. With no parents and only old grandparents to bring along. Poor thing. You should have accepted my proposal back then. What? But I'm glad I found you. I came here to ask you for a favor. Listen, can you get my dad and mom into this facility? I've been begging the authorities for care, but no luck. Oh. Alright. If I marry you, I won't have to pay for expensive care facilities. I don't really want an old maid, but I'll take you. It'll be easier for you to care for my parents than being overworked here. And you'll get the status of being married. That rude old man must regret taking away your only chance to get married, huh? Hey, are you listening? With that vacant look, no wonder I'm the only one. Grace, sorry to keep you waiting. What? A man parked his car near William and me, leaning out the window. Sorry to keep a pregnant lady waiting. Pregnant? William, surprised, looked at my belly, agape. He had been so engrossed in his delusions, he hadn't noticed my pregnancy. Yes, 2 years ago, I met a man Grandpa approved of, got married, and now we're expecting a little life. Who's this man? My husband asked curiously. An ex-fiancé? I replied, and after a brief frown, he smiled warmly. Nice to meet you. I'm Daniel, Grace's husband. I don't know what you need with my wife, but we have an errand at her family home, so excuse us. Just wait! I haven't finished talking. As I moved to the passenger seat Daniel opened for me, William tried to grab my arm. I spun him down to the ground, using the self-defense techniques Grandpa taught me after that incident. Looking coldly at William sprawled on the ground, I said, What do you want to talk about? I can't get your parents into this facility, but I can warn the director about you, a person who speaks ill of others' grandparents. Ugh. And it seems you're the one in trouble, not me. After we broke up, you tried to deceive a young girl at work, but got sued and had to pay another settlement. Lost your job and now your mom needs care, right? How did you end up like this? How do you know that? His face turned pale with shock. Ignoring William, I got into the car. I have more important things in my life than dealing with such a selfish, irredeemable man. Wait, please! Help me! His pitiful cries faded as Daniel drove away. Did you and the baby have a good day at work, Grandma? As I got out of the car at my family home, Grandma came over, happily patting my belly. Ever since I got pregnant, she's become more energetic. I'm going to the zoo with my great-grandchild. And she eats healthy food every day. Daniel, I got some good fish today. Oh, nice. My boss just recommended a great wine to me. My husband and Grandpa entered the house, chatting happily. Grandpa took to Daniel the moment they met, and Grandma told me he always looks out the window on the days we visit. Grandpa says, He has a nice smile. Daniel, preparing to be a dad, reads parenting books and cookbooks for our unborn child and me. The precious scene of my husband, grandparents, our child, and me, all around the dinner table, perfectly matched the future I had hoped for. I'm glad I trusted Grandpa's judgment of people. At dinner, I savored not just the meal, but also my happiness.